Culinary specialists, also known as CSs, but they're the ones that cook usually for a whole ship. And honestly, I think they get a really bad rap. To give an example, I have about 300 people on my ship. So underway, that means you have to cook meals for 300 sailors, 3 meals a day, each with some sort of protein, like 2 options for protein. You get 2 sides, you get 2 veggie groups, soup, set up a salad bar, and sometimes they do like cake or cookies. That's 900 meals on average every single day. And then they also have to like keep some of that food or cook a little extra for mid-rats. So it's like half a meal. So 3.5 meals for 300 people. It's a lot. One could say it's an extremely important job. If they mess up something where the food is not cooked properly and people get food poisoning, then you take out a whole ship. It's an extremely important job, and it's a tough job at times. You got to cook all the food, maintain a clean working environment, so cleaning up in between each meal, order the food to include portions and rationings, or they can plan it out properly for sometimes not being resupplied for weeks at a time. They got to manage their own people, management of resources and time. It's underappreciated, and my hat goes off to them. Of course, people like to make fun of them a lot because sometimes the food's not that great, but, they're dealing with what the Navy supply can give them, and, they're doing their best to get it out there and make sure you're fed 3 times a day. So I don't really think they should be, dumped on as much as they are. But with that being said, they actually aren't the ones that do the serving of all the food. They usually, or even all the cleaning. You got food service attendants, or cranks. And cranking is something that, E6 and Junior will do in the enlisted side at one point or another. And I don't know what happened down the line, but they're called FSAs, food service attendants. You can't call them cranks anymore, so I'm going to call it that's just what I grew up with. But that's where you help out with the serving, cleaning, and movement to store food in preparation for the next day. You're helping out the CSs, and also, you're serving the crew. Usually lasts about 90 days, but some people will hold it there for like 6 months or 120 days. It depends, but most places I've seen, it's like 90 days. You just do a rotation. If you go in like right when you first check on board and you're very junior, you'll most likely just be a basic FSA or a crank. And then if you go in as like a first class or second class to go cranking, usually you'll be like the one in charge of all the FSAs to make sure, rotation happens properly and people are doing their jobs and tasking and whatnot. But yeah, there's a couple places you could go cranking. You could go crank in the general mess, which is for, E6 and junior. You're going to be, serving your shipmates, probably someone that you work with at one point while you're working for supply. And then you go back to your group, or you could crank in the officers mess, or the wardroom is what it's called. That's just for officers. Or you can go cranking in the chief's mess hang out in the chief's mess and whatever shenanigans go on in there. So cranking in the general mess, you work with the main line, serving or cleaning up tables, cleaning dishes, serving trays or cooking trays, taking out the trash. This is the basic stuff that you're doing on the main line. If you go cranking in the wardroom, you get knee pads. I'm just kidding. You either serve portions individually to officers, clean officers' mess, like the area where they eat. Same thing you do in the general mess. But some places I've seen actually have you clean their rooms, like basic stuff, like just like sweep and dust. But some places actually say go clean their bathrooms, which is gross. Cranking in the cheese mess, from what I have seen and what I've done, is you either just serve them food just the same, or they have their own line set up, so you just set up the line and then they'll serve themselves. So portion control, that's probably why there's a lot of fat cheese. Or you'll do some general housekeeping for them. You'll sweep up the mess or something like that, but you won't sweep their berthings or anything like that. They do that themselves, but they might ask you to like, hey, stock the toilet paper or something like that. But that stuff like that, from what I've seen, cheese mess usually just clean up after themselves. So if you get a choice of where you want to go cranking, in general, I would suggest going to the cheese mess because there's a lot more fun that happens in there. But, it doesn't matter. And it's 90 days, and then you're done. You go back to your division that you're assigned. So you actually like go TAD to that division. You muster with them every morning. Some places actually take you off the watch bill, so you're not in a duty section anymore, which is pretty sweet. But then you kind of work odd hours or odd days in that sense. Underway cranking is definitely the worst compared to import, because you are going to work most of the day at that point, where you're going to usually either work or support all 3 meal hours. So that could be a little rough at times. But in general, it's, you're just giving back to the crew and helping out the CSs. Now, as far as choosing where you want to go, like I said, I would definitely choose the cheese mess. I just think it's way more fun being in there. Not just because I'm a chief, but I also cranked in the chief's mess when I was a crank or an FSA at the time. And there are some pretty interesting things that I saw in there when I was a junior sailor. But there's actually like a really funny story. When we were underway, the wardroom crank was sick and didn't come underway with us. They ended up staying. It was just like a 3-day underway. But I don't think anyone had planned on this underway because a lot of people were drinking the night before. So a lot of people were hungover. I wasn't because I had to work the day before anyway as a crank. So it wasn't a big deal. But the next morning I was helping and I was setting up breakfast, and the navigation officer comes in and sits down at his designated spot on the table. And on this ship that I was on, a cruiser, there's a little porthole, a window for the wardroom that shines in, and it was shining in right at his face. And I hand him his plate and he doesn't move, and I'm like, you can move, you know. And he was just not loving the fact that he was drinking the night before and he had light in his face. So he reaches over, grabs the phone, and asks what course we're going. And he suggests a course change by like 30 degrees, and then hangs up the phone, sits back down in his chair, and you can see the ship turn. Because the ship's turning, the light moves out of his face. And he looks over at me and winks. And I was like, wow, that was stupid. You could have just moved. But yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea what cranking is or working as an FSA. And props out to all my CS friends out there. If you guys have any more questions, want to hear about any specific jobs you do underway or specific to a ship, let me know in the comment section below. Hooyah Navy.